Let's talk to the Associate Director for Energy and Climate at the IPPR, Luke Murphy. Good morning, Luke.
Good morning, Kevin.
This is a dark day, isn't it? Not just for the poorest, but for many, many millions of people. I've never known anything like this. This is just like a kind of bolt to the head, isn't it? It's awful.
I completely agree, and it's, as you say, it's unprecedented. And I think there'll be families, there'll be parents, pensioners, kind of across the country, sitting at the kitchen table, in the living room, on their way to work, looking at their bills and wondering how on earth they're gonna make ends meet. And as you say, it's going to affect everyone, and everyone is going to be thinking, well, actually, where am I going to cut back to be able to afford to pay these increased prices? But there's also going to be millions that are going to be pushed into poverty that know that they've already cut back to the bone. They're already suffering from a cost of living crisis, and we've heard from the Citizens Advice Bureau stories of people thinking about warming their tins of beans with candles and trying to find a cold place in their home to store their medicine because they can't afford the electricity to put the fridge on. So it really is a dark day. And we, IPPR and many others, are calling on the government to do much, much more to support people through this crisis.
I mean, some of the reasons for this energy rocketing hike are not necessarily the government's fault, although I've got a few reasons where I think it is their fault, but let's absolve them of some of the blame because there are international pressures that have resulted in these soaring energy prices. So that notwithstanding, it's happened. And the government's response so far seems to have been a rather flashy, show-busy speech by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, in the House of Commons last week in his spring statement, which upon analysis did the square root of sod all for basically anyone, although it did provide him with an excellent opportunity for a photo op, filling a car with petrol and buying a can of Coke in a service station. The government hasn't done enough. It needs to do something concrete to really help people, doesn't it? And to right off the bat, let's get rid of that national insurance hike.
Well, I think you're right that the government could absolutely be doing more. And just going back to your point about this is 95% of the increases in energy bills is to do the increase in wholesale gas energy prices, which is were already increasing as we came out from the COVID pandemic, and it has obviously been exacerbated by the tragedy in Ukraine. But it is also true that the government for the last 10 years has underinvested in things like energy efficiency to lower the energy demand of households, make people's homes warmer and their energy bills more affordable. So yes, some of these things were outside of their control, but it's also true they could have been doing much, much more, as many have been calling for over the last 10 years, in order to prepare people and make them more resilient to that. And then on the national insurance rise, well, I mean, the thing is, we've argued that there are actually much better ways for the government to make changes, for instance, to tax wealth more than they do people's income, but they've ignored these calls. And indeed, they've also ignored calls even now to provide greater investment in the things that can help solve this crisis, improve our energy security, our national security, and bring down people's bills. And that's by investing in more renewables and in more energy efficiency and getting us off gas and ensuring that we're not relying on the whims of an authoritarian dictator.
Well, they're going to find out, this government, that just seeking headlines and good-sounding sound bites is not going to be enough here, because 22 million homes today, their energy bills went up by £700 a year to almost £2,000 a year, and many people will be paying more than that. And this is going to push people over the edge. This is going to push people into poverty. And the government really does need to do something. Otherwise, we've got something of a social catastrophe on our hands, I suspect.
I completely agree. I think the government has seriously underestimated and is seriously out of touch from the impact that this is going to have on households. It is a political choice to decide, for very short-termist reasons, for very political reasons, it seems, to not provide support to those households, those families with children, those pensioners that are going to be suffering as a result of these increases. I mean, one of the things we've called for is uprating of benefits, universal credit, which largely goes to many people who are relying on universal credit are in work, by inflation, and also increasing the child child benefit payments. But there's a range of other ways they could have helped instead, and indeed some of this could have been paid by a windfall tax on the oil and gas industry. But for some bizarre reason, the government has chosen to side with them, allow them to operate, exploit this crisis, in the words of the chief executive of BP, like a cash machine for big corporations like them, allowed them to make huge profits, and has decided to allow families to bear the burden of this crisis. And I think they're going to have a rude awakening when they realise the strength of anger that people are going to be feeling because of the quite significant impact it's going to have on households. And it's not just the lowest incomes, it's loads of people on low to middle incomes. And I think the government really is going to have to come back and think again. And I know that some organisations are now calling for an emergency budget. Can we really wait until October for Rishi Sunak to come back with yet more inadequate proposals to support households?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to have to do something pretty soon, because they don't seem to have realised the reality of all this. As I say, they seem to have treated it as some kind of political opportunity to seek some headlines and say, look how much we're helping, when it was immediately revealed by the Institute of Fiscal Studies that Rishi Sunak's spring statement didn't really help anyone at all. It just made some good headlines for about one day. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not entirely convinced by the windfall tax on oil companies, but certainly at least it's a serious proposal that would help. I mean, I would propose, how about not taxing the people? How about taking the tax rises away? I mean, this guy, Rishi Sunak, is the most extraordinary sort of three-card trick. He said, look, I'm going to raise the threshold on which you have to start paying your national insurance tax rise. But we haven't even started paying it yet. So he gave us a tax break on a tax we weren't even paying, and then said he was going to bring down the general rate of tax by 1p but in 2024. What we need is help right now, not in 2024.
I mean, absolutely. And politics is all about choices. And I understand what you're saying about the windfall tax. But, you have commentators like Chris Giles at the FT, a kind of respected economics commentator, saying it's completely reasonable to impose something like a windfall tax. This is an exceptional scenario where companies like the oil and gas companies that operate in the North Sea are making an absolute mint off the back of the households, ordinary households across the country, and some of the poorest people in Britain today. We don't even have to go back that far. In fact, only 11 years to another Conservative Chancellor, George Osborne, hardly known for being a kind of left-wing Chancellor, who imposed a windfall tax then on oil and gas profits. It was also done under Margaret Thatcher's government. Why on earth would the government choose to allow these companies to continue to make those profits while, as you say, not providing support to households who absolutely need it now? They're really going to have to rethink.
Yeah, I was just trying to be honest. My personal feelings, I'm not convinced by the idea of windfall taxing the oil companies. But as I say, I absolutely concede. At least it is a genuine, serious, practical proposition towards a solution to the cost of living crisis. We've been talking glibly for a couple of months now about the upcoming cost of living crisis. We're about to find out exactly what it means, Luke. Good to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. That was Luke Murphy. He's the IPPR Associate Director for Energy and Climate. Let's get to some of your calls. Let's go.